Joining me right now is Pennsylvania Congressman and member of the House Appropriations Committee and House Rules Committee, Guy Reschenthaler. And Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for being here. So Kamala Harris is talking about agriculture and one of the issues in terms of this migrant surge. She says she wants to get to the root cause. What are your views on that?
Well, the root cause is right here in Washington, D.C., and it's the Biden administration. Maria, they could stop this crisis by just adopting the policies that President Trump put in place, reconstructing portions of the border wall that they tore down, ending the catch and release program that was a failure under the Obama-Biden administration, and then, of course, reinstituting the asylum in place procedures where these immigrants don't have to make the dangerous trek through Mexico. They can just seek asylum to the United States by staying in place or seeking it in Mexico rather than handing their lives over to the coyotes and the Mexican drug cartels. So this talk about climate change and agriculture, it's a deflection from the real cause of the problem, which is the Biden administration's policies. And also, the Democrats will never fail to bring up climate change, because with the topic of climate change, they can bring in policies like the Green New Deal and bring in centralized planning and socialist policies. So, of course, they're going to try to make this crisis fit their overall narrative of more government control.
So what about that Green New Deal? Let's talk about this so-called infrastructure bill. Joe Manchin is in the middle. The West Virginia senator said yesterday he would be willing to back a bill as large as $4 trillion as long as it was paid for. Congressman, Senate Republicans are preparing a plan between $600 and $800 billion on infrastructure. Tell me about that. Would something like that pass, even though Joe Biden has a $2.25 trillion bill that he's trying to push, which is very small portion actual infrastructure?
Exactly. The Democrats have expanded the term infrastructure. You know, it's like something from a dystopian novel where language is constantly changing. Now, infrastructure means things like home health care. So if we would focus on true infrastructure, roads, bridges, locks and dams, airports, even rural broadband, a lot of Republicans could get behind as infrastructure. We could get something passed with, I would say, overwhelming bipartisan support. But the Democrats can't do that because they promise the radical base things like tax credits to solar power, electric vehicle funding, which of course goes directly to China, and then of course these socialist policies, higher tax rates, home health care issues, which we can have that debate. We might be able to support that, but don't do it under the guise of so-called infrastructure spending.
So who's running things here? I mean, whose ideas are this? Yesterday, Nancy Pelosi was asked about court packing. She rejected it. She said her colleague's bill to expand the bench to 13 justices will not make it to the floor for debate, but she says she still supports a White House commission to study expanding the Supreme Court. What about that? And what about all of these policies that are obviously not moderate? If Joe Biden says he's moderate, but he's passing all of this stuff, who's running things in your view?
Well, remember, Joe Biden is just the Trojan horse. He promised that he was going to unite the country. He was going to govern as a moderate. He was going to seek bipartisan solutions. But it's the far left that's really in control of this party. And they have zero inclination to work with Republicans. They want to cram through a far left agenda. And as far as it comes to court packing, I don't take Nancy Pelosi at her word on this. I think that the Democrats are biding time with this commission. And what I mean by that is this. They know they can't get court packing through while the filibuster is in place. So you're going to see Chuck Schumer try to build pressure within that Democrat conference in the Senate to get enough Democrats behind the idea of ending the filibuster. Once that filibuster is ended, if it is ended, then you're going to see this so-called commission from Biden say, okay, now it's time to pack the Supreme Court so we can, quote unquote, depoliticize it. It's incredibly disingenuous. Don't kid yourselves. The Democrats want total control. They want one-party rule for decades to come, and that's why they need to get rid of the filibuster, why they need to pack the Supreme Court, and why they need to bring in D.C. as a state. They really are hell-bent on total control.
Well, look, over the near term, they've been able to get all of these things through. They got through a $1.9 trillion spending package, and they called it COVID relief, even though it was only 10% COVID related. Now they're pushing this so-called infrastructure package. It's a spending package that's only 20% actual infrastructure. They're using reconciliation. What's next? Tell us about the tax increases that are coming. My sources tell me that within the next 2 weeks, we're going to hear more about new revenue, wanting new revenue raised through individual tax increases. What should we expect?
Well, the reason why they're doing everything through reconciliation and through the budget is because, of course, that circumvents the filibuster, and they just need a 50% vote. But as far as taxes go, yes, they're around the halls of Congress talking about corporate income taxes hikes, personal income tax hikes, doing away with things like the stepped-up basis with tax planning. It's a horrible idea because, Maria, at the end of the day, the only way you increase government revenue is growing the GDP. That's the only way you do it. And the only two ways you grow GDP is you either cut taxes or you reduce regulation, or preferably you do both. But when you have these high corporate income taxes, it's going to take more corporations offshore. It's going to make it less competitive for companies to expand business in the United States, and it's going to actually shrink the GDP or slow its growth. And then, of course, we're not going to get the revenue that's projected. So that's what's really a shame about all this, is it has the exact opposite intended consequence that the Democrats are promising.
All right, that's too bad. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. We'll keep watching the news flow on all of this. Congressman Guy Reschenthaler this morning.